Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. This live is going to be a lot of fun because we are tea dyeing paper. This is one of my favorite things to do. So, I'm just going to wait a second just for people to join, and then we'll get right to it. Um, so I'm kind of out of sorts this morning. You're going to see some lines across here. I'm doing this in my kitchen, and I have what do you call it? Those hanging ceiling pot holders above me. So I'm seeing a little bit of lines. I apologize for that, but I need a bigger surface today, and I had to. I had to go down to my kitchen. So it's a little out of sorts today, but that's okay. We're going to have fun tea dyeing papers. So I love tea dyeing papers. It's such a fun process, and the results are just awesome. Um, I like to keep a stash of the tea dye papers in my craft room because I use a lot of it. I use a lot of tea dye papers in my junk journal. So I always have to make sure that I have a nice hefty stash so that when I'm starting a new journal or two, I can just go into my stash and just grab some vintage papers and just keep going with my journal. So this whole process is really easy. And let's have fun with this. Oh, good morning, Christine. Happy Sunday morning to you. Okay, so let's talk about tea dyeing. What can you tea dye? Basically, if it's paper, I've tea dyed it, except for two different things. I haven't tea dyed newspapers yet, and I haven't tea dyed magazines. And the reason why I haven't done either of those, number one, I'm concerned about the ink with newspapers. I don't know if it's going to bleed and cause an issue with my papers, like if it's going to bleed and affect my other papers I'm tea dyeing, or if it's going to come out as a mess. And then also, I don't have any newspapers, so that's another reason why I don't tea dye papers. Now, with magazines, the reason why I don't tea dye those is because it's got that shiny surface to it, and I don't know if the tea dye is going to go in there. And really, I haven't found any papers from magazines I do want to tea dye, so that's another reason why I haven't done those two. But with regards to anything else, when it comes to papers, I've tea dyed it. So let's go through a list of things that you can tea dye. Well, you can tea dye copier paper. I love tea dyeing copier paper. This is copier paper that my husband had in his office, and they weren't going to use it. And I'm like, I'll take it. I'll tea dye it. And I've been going through this like crazy. I do like this, and usually on my pages on my books, I cut that off, or I just keep it on, and it looks really good with my book. You can do all colors. I don't have any colors anymore. I went through a stash of like the papers that someone gave me some copier paper, and it had yellow, pink, blue, and green in it. And man, do those papers look good tea dyed. You can use graph paper. There are so many different types of graph paper out there. Um, like this is a nice was called engineering tablet. I found this at a secondhand store, and a nice grid paper on it. There's some more of that. You can also go to the dollar store. Sometimes they have graph paper like this, and I think right now they have some that look like this. This is at the dollar store right now. So this is a little bit thinner, but so you have to be careful with it when you take it out of your bath, your tea bath. But it looks pretty cool and vintage, so that one got a thumbs up for me. You can also do accounting paper. Accounting paper you can find at secondhand stores. I've got some that are horizontal and some that are vertical, and yeah, those tea dye really well. Of course, there's music paper, and then you have the line paper, and then you can do treat bags. Like these are little treat bags from the dollar store. They're great. You can do envelopes and index cards and doilies. I love doing doilies. And then there's the library cards and pockets that you can do. There's sales receipt books, like, for example, this right here that dyed really well and it looks really cool. Um, yeah, old cards and postcards. Yeah, you can do those. Basically, if it's paper, why not try it? Why not try tea dyeing it? And if you're concerned about whether it's going to bleed or how it's going to look, then save it for last before you tea dye anything else. And but just in case you're concerned about bleeding. So, yeah, give it a try. Oh, here's a nice piece of blue that was tea dyed. This was lined. Look how nice that looks. Okay. I was asked if you can tea dye ribbon. Yes, you can tea dye ribbon. You can tea dye fabric. It looks really good, tea dyed. I had rolls of this seam binding. I was actually looking earlier this week to order another 100 yards of it. It's a very thin, it's like a satin, I don't know if you can see that, seam binding. And it's rayon, I think. It's rayon with a satin finish, and it's single. It's not the folded one. And this is really good for tea dyeing and for just regular dyeing. I keep a roll of that at my desk at all times. So, okay, so let's just put this aside. Now you have the materials that you want to dye. You're going to gather up all your papers that in like fabric or ribbon that you want to dye. And so, what's the next step? You're going to have to prep your tea for dyeing. And so, you're going to need some tea bags. Um, you can you can recycle your current tea bags that you use during the week. Like, just if you know you're going to tea dye on the weekend, just start saving your tea bags during the week. Like, after you use them for your tea, just put them in the container and just stick them in the fridge until the weekend. And just get a nice gathering of them. This is a great way to reuse your tea bags. And yeah, so after you have a nice stash, just grab a pot and fill it with water. So I'll show you the pot I use. I used 2 different pots this week, but let me move this here. A lot of stuff on this counter. This is my tea vat. Oh, you can see a cat hair in there. That's okay. So I had this full yesterday. I filled it up, I don't know, halfway full, and I put a whole bunch of tea bags in it. So here are the tea bags I put in. This is a mix of orange pekoe and black, just plain black tea. And so I used several bags. I wanted a darker tea bath that I was doing yesterday. And so I put a whole bunch in. Some of them were new, some of them were spent. And so in the morning, what I did was I took them, I put them in this pot, I boiled them, and then I turned the burner off and I let it sit for, gosh, I think it was 2 or 3 hours. I can't remember. It was a little while. And so, yeah, so those were the, oh my God, I'm just moving my papers here. That was my tea bath I did yesterday. So you let it steep for a while. The longer it steeps, the darker color you're going to get, the more colors you're going to have in your tea bag or in your tea solution. So when you pick your tea bags, you're going to want to kind of pick them according to what you want your color of your papers to be. I like orange pekoe with a little bit of black in it. And the reason why I pick those two is because that's going to match the vintage photo ink, distress ink that I use on my envelopes or other pages. Like, like when you go around and you stain your pages to make them look darker. I use that one the most. And I find that a blend of the orange pekoe and the black is a really good color. It matches really well with that distress ink. But I've also used, and I know I'm going to pronounce this poorly, the Robos tea. I used that for a batch I did on Tuesday. I used that with some Earl Grey, and I think that was it. So that one had a lighter color to it. It didn't have the dark orange, and I didn't use as many tea bags. So, yeah, like if you compare like this sheet, I don't know if you can really see that. You probably can't see that very well. But it's really light. It's a light color. But then yesterday's batch, which had more tea in it, it's a darker color. Yeah, I'm sorry, you really can't see that very well, but yeah, it's a darker. It has a darker brown with a little bit of orange to it. It looks like a light vintage photo. It looks like vintage photo kind of watered down. So that's what I've done this week. I've done those two batches. Now, can you use coffee? Yes, you can use coffee. What I have done is I have taken some of my husband's Keurig cup things, and I've run them through again. After he's used them, I've run them through again. Now, with the coffee, what I found, at least with his, is that it gives a little bit more of a black color undertone to the papers, which that's fine. If you want a little bit of black in there, if you want it to look a little bit darker, then add a little bit of coffee to it. It'll look great. But the only thing is with the coffee and with the, like, if you don't have tea bags, but if you use loose tea, you're gonna want to be mindful of how that's managed. Like, you might want to put one of those tea bag strainers around it to like a cloth one, to make sure that the grit from your coffee and the dust from the tea bags, the loose tea, do not get in your papers. I've done that before on accident without using the fabric tea bag holder, and it's left grit on my paper and dust on my paper. So I'm constantly, when I use those papers, I'm constantly brushing them off because of all the dirt and the grit on it. So that's something to be mindful of. So next, I'm going to go back to this. So we've got our tea bags. They're steeped in here. It's the color I want. You know what? I want to start prepping this and getting ready for my tea dyeing session. So you want to neutralize your solution. So tea and coffee, they're very acidic. And if you're a paper crafter, you know that you want to avoid things that have high acid in it, because it might ruin your papers or dye your papers, or like if you're writing on it, it might reduce your ink. It might eliminate your ink. So you might start with black ink, and then all of a sudden, over time, it just changes or just goes away because it just eats away at that ink. So you don't want that. So you take your tea solution and you add some baking soda. So with this guy here, this is a big one. What I do is I put half a teaspoon of baking soda in there. If I'm putting coffee in it, or if I'm putting a lot of tea in there, I might go a little bit more. If you have a smaller pan, then you might want to go a little bit less. If you're concerned, just bump it up a little bit more. Instead of a half a teaspoon, go with 3/4 or something. But basically, you just want to neutralize the acid that's in your tea, so this way it doesn't ruin your papers or your project. So then, while you're waiting for this to cool down, and after you add in your baking soda, you're going to want to prep your work surface. And you can see on this surface, I have a towel here. So I'm on the island in my kitchen, and to protect this island and to protect any work surface that I use, when I'm tea dyeing stuff, I make sure that I have a vinyl tablecloth underneath here. And that vinyl tablecloth, it's like sacrificial. I use that for anything that I'm tea dyeing or ink dyeing, or whatever. If I know I'm going to make a mess, I'm going to pull out one of my vinyl tablecloths, and I'm going to use that. And then for tea dyeing, I put the towel on top. And the reason why you put a towel on top is because if you just put a piece of paper right on your vinyl tablecloth, it's not going to dry. And it's just going to stick there. It's just going to sit in the tea, and it's just not going to dry very well. But if you use a towel underneath it, that towel is going to soak that up, and then you're going to have your papers dry a lot quicker. Now, of course, your towels, now you've got some sacrificial towels, but I have a dog, and I have a lot of dog towels, and yeah, I just kind of rotate them through. So you've got your work surface prepped, you got your tea solution prepped. So now you're going to want to get your pan ready for your tea making or your tea dyeing. So I'm just going to move this out of the way too. I have a very large cake pan. So I apologize for the color coming off of there. This thing is huge. This is one of those that is for a sheet cake. I don't know how big it is, but here's the 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So you can see how much room it takes up in there. Like I've got a good, 1.5 or 2 inches around this thing. And the reason why I like to use this is because I can fit my papers in there without it curling. And like when I do my papers, I want the whole thing to be submerged in the tea solution. So you can use like a regular casserole dish. Here's an example of a regular casserole dish. I'm just soaking a couple of things right now, so you can see that the paper is just kind of curled up in there. And so, yeah, I mean, it might not be an issue if you have a lot of tea solution in here and it stays submerged. It might not be a problem. But I like having it larger so I can stick more things in there, because when I'm tea dyeing, I'm doing a tea dyeing session. I'm putting a whole bunch of stuff in there. The tea dye, and I just want the bigger the better in that case. So when it comes to that sheet cake pan, you can pick up at a secondhand store. I bought mine. It was on clearance or something at what do you call it, Michael's, and so I got a good price, and I don't regret that a single minute. Now, another thing that you might want is one of those cookie cooling sheets. And again, I have a huge one. And what I like about this is that it sits high above my towel. Like if I'm lacking space, if it's winter, and if I'm not drying my tea dyed items outside, then I'll have a table set up in my living room, and then I'll have like my table with a vinyl cloth and the towels on it, and then I might put these on it too, because I'll put like tags and pockets underneath here, or envelopes, and then I'll just put this on top, so it's raised above it just slightly, and then I get a little bit more of a drying space there. So not necessary, but it's a nice little tip if you're short on space. Okay, so we've got that. We've got our pan. Let's see. Let's get the pan going. Got the pan here. I apologize again for the glare. So I'm just pouring that tea into it. Now, again, the color of your tea, how dark you want your solution, is dependent on you. Like, do you want your tea, or do you want your dyed papers really dark? Then, yeah, put your tea bags in there, put spent ones in there, and put some new ones in there too. And that'll make a nice deep solution. And again, this is what I made yesterday, and because I wanted some darker papers for my junk journal, so that's why I'm making this so dark. I apologize for the glare. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's the fun. You just take your stuff and you just dunk it in. So I'm going to start with papers. This came from a book, a music book. Look at that cat. That is awesome. So like that one's going in there. And you're going to do this one at a time. You're going to take your paper and just kind of push it in. If you put like your stack of stuff in at one time, like let's say you have a whole stack of papers of things that you want to tea dye, if you put them in like that, the solution might not get in between your pages. So I do it one at a time. And then you put another one in. So you're going to get messy, but it's okay. Crafting is fun, and this project here is just so much fun. I love it. So, and then I have some sales order sheets here. So I'm going to put those in too. Got a couple of these. And I've got a pink one too. Now here's the thing. I tea dyed this earlier in the week. These papers, these two, the pink and the yellow, earlier in the week. And what I found was when I pulled this pink paper out and laid it on a white piece of paper, copier paper, that just happened to be underneath it. It was a slight overlap. The pink kind of bled on there. So when you're doing colored papers for the first time, you might want to save those for last. So this way, if you're concerned about it dyeing or bleeding, that doesn't dye your paper. And also when you're drying it, you might want to make sure that that's just kind of not touching anything else if you're concerned about it. Okay, so I'm just going to set these aside because I like to talk about envelopes right now. Envelopes can be tricky. Put this over here. So here's an envelope. It's already sealed up. I cut it from the side there. Now with envelopes, when I put this into my solution, there's a good chance that this is just going to come undone. That tea is going to seep into where these pages are glued together, or these papers are glued together, and it's just going to come undone. I can't count how many times I've taken, especially the ones that aren't security coated on the inside, how many times I've let them soak and they've opened up when I put them on my towel to dry. Which, I mean, that's fine. But that means that you might have an issue with your solution if you put envelopes in before you do your papers. Because that glue, that adhesive that's holding those pages together, it might mix in with your tea. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm very cautious with that. My solution, I don't want my solution to ruin my pages in any way. And so that's why I always save my envelopes for last. So how can you work around that? Well, you can, again, just dunk it in last, or you can take, you can do a quick, just one side down in your solution, and you know that might work too. Another thing that I like to do is I like to use a sprayer. I've had this sprayer, I don't know how long, probably 10 or 15 years. It's been through a lot. We've seen some things together. So what I might do is, and I've done this before, and you can do this at any point, you just take your bottle and you fill it with your tea solution. And, you know, the results might not be the same as what it would be if you dunked it, but it still looks, it has a really cool finish on it. And it still looks really neat. It still looks vintagey. I'll take this guy here and I'll show you. So you can kind of see how it's kind of spraying on there. Oh, that's really bright. So when this dries, there's going to be little spots of brown on there. You can see the brown there. That's a good shade there. Yeah, the lighting in here is not great, so I apologize for that. So I'm just going to let this dry like that. Now the thing is, the darker your solution, the better it's going to show up on these envelopes. So if you have like a watered down color or a light color, or if you're using more of the spent tea bags, that might not show up as well. But I mean, that's okay. It will still have a vintage feel to it. So let's see. Yep, so we covered the envelopes. You can do the same with CD covers. Don't forget, these might or might not have the adhesive there, but they have them here. I have CD covers. I love doing the CD covers with it. And then the bags, and my friend just gave me this yesterday. So this is something that I'm going to tea dye after this because it has the adhesive on it. I don't know if you can see that. So this is going to be one of the last things that I'm going to tea dye today. So another thing that you can do, and I really like doing this. This is just fun. You know what? Actually, how about I just show you this solution here, and then I'll show you another thing that's fun to do because my doily is stuck underneath there. And that was poor planning on my part. I should have put the doily on top to show you the next process, but that's okay. So this paper has been soaking in here for about 15 minutes. When it comes to soaking your paper, that's going to be your personal choice. The less time you soak your paper, that means the less tea coloring, the tea dyeing you're going to have on your paper. So like you can see here, between the 2 pages, that's white copier paper. This was white, but I let this soak in this darker solution for at least a half hour yesterday. And those are my results. It's stunning. It looks vintage. It looks great. So this one here has been in here for about 15 minutes, I think, or 20 minutes. Like, oh, it's 10:25. So maybe an hour. So I'm going to gently pull this out. And I apologize for my dog. So I'm going to gently pull this out, and I'm just going to lay this flat right on my towel. Easy peasy. It's just going to dry like this, right? However, if you want to have pooling, like you can see here, it's starting to pool, and that's where it's curved up. But you can take your fingers and do lines or just whatever. You want to press down on it and create pooling spots. And then in those pooling spots, you're going to have the tea collect. And then that means that when it dries, it's going to have a collected area like this. Like, look at that tea pooling. That is amazing. Just taking your hand and just kind of going along there. And that's the results you're going to get. This is going to look awesome in a junk journal. Love the way that looks. Another thing that you can do, you can dip your fingers in here and just kind of flick it. Now, you can do it like this. Like, you can wait a few minutes for this to kind of dry just a little bit on your paper and then flick it. Like right now, it's still kind of wet. Or you can wait until sorry about my dog. Or you can wait until later on, and you can flick it when it's drier. But what I like to do, and like maybe I'll just take a white piece of paper so that one, it's not dyed, so you can see what's going on. So this is just a plain white piece of copy paper. This is a good blank slate. You can flick regular, and look, you've got really nice flicks on there of tea. However, you can also take, if you want something really dark and dramatic on there, you can take a fresh tea bag. I call it fresh because it has been used in tea. This tea is actually really old. I found this in my cupboard. You just kind of put it in your tea water and just get it all wet. Like, you want the tea that's in the tea bag to really kind of soak up that water in there. And sorry, the dogs next door are barking. Now my dog is barking. And then you just kind of, I'm going to squeeze a little bit there, and then I'm just going to drop it. And you can see the difference already that this tea bag, this fresh one, is making on this paper. Like, that is really dark, and it makes it very dramatic. And I like the way this looks. So I'm just going to kind of move it around a little bit, just kind of mix it up. And that's the way it's going to dry. Now, this is one that I really like. White copier paper. I've been soaking this doily here. For about an hour. And I'm just going to set this on here. And this is how it's going to dry. It's going to dry with this doily on here. So I'm just going to set it aside and just let it dry that way. This one is cool. I don't know if you can see, it's got like texture in it. So that's going to leave a really neat impression on your paper. So let me grab what I did yesterday. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So imagine if you took a piece of just regular scrapbook paper and you didn't want to tea dye the whole paper, but you wanted this impression on there. Just look at how that turned out. I love that. And what I'm going to do today is, and I'll, let me take some papers now, just 1 second. I've got these 2 bags right here. Well, I got more than 2. I've got these bags here. Oops. And what I'll do is it'll be like that. I will take a tea bag. I'll take a doily and put it right on my pockets, just like that, and it'll leave a cool design. But I'll do it on the whole thing. So yeah, I don't know if Baxter's very funny, Christine. I don't think Baxter's barking his approval for the dogs next door. Okay, so that's that. So we have the tea dyed. And you know what? I'm just going to cut some of this right now. So this is going to soak up pretty quick. That's my seam binding. You can already see how dark it is. Look at that. It's already dark. Just like if you spill tea on your clothes, which how many times have you done that? I know I've done it a lot. It's just going to soak that in. So that means that you have a nice tea-colored ribbon to match your goodies. So, sorry, I had to make a list of things today to talk to you about this because I love tea dyeing and I just want to make sure I got all the information out to you guys. So let me just make sure I ticked all my boxes. Okay. So, yeah, so now we're on the last step here, and this is just after you've tea dyed your stuff. Everything's dry and you're looking at it and you're like, you know what? That is, you might look at this and you're like, I don't like that tea dyed. It wasn't dark enough. It just didn't turn out the way I liked it to. So it could be a few things. It could be that your paper has a coating on it. And I kind of briefly mentioned this before. Some papers have coatings on it. I find it, especially with music sheets, like sometimes I'll buy an old music book or a music book from like, I don't know, 90s or something, and it has a coating on it. And I find that it doesn't dye. It doesn't take in that tea dye like I want it to. So you can have a coating on your paper. You might want to check your hands too. If you have oil on your hands, my friend went through this yesterday. There's a spot on her paper that was not dyeing at all, and it turned out cool because it meant that there's a white spot on it, and everything else was tea dye. But there might be oil on your fingers or on your hands, so make sure your hands are nice and washed and dry. Like you don't want to have like what do you call it, lotion on your hands before you do this. If you find that it's not, again, not dyeing the way you want it to, it could be due to the fact that your solution just wasn't dark enough. Your tea bags might have been too spent, that there wasn't enough dye left in those tea bags to really dye your papers. That might mean next time, just throw a couple of fresh tea bags in there, or throw more tea bags in there. It just might not be enough. You can kind of tell when you make your solution how dark something is going to be. So just kind of go by that. Like if you're looking at it and you're just like, that's still pretty light, then, throw some more tea bags in it. It could be too that you just didn't steep it long enough, that you put your paper in and you might have put it in there for only a few minutes and then you pulled it out and then it just barely put a coating on it. Like if you want really dark tea dye papers, you're going to want it to soak, your papers to soak in there too, because again, papers have different finishes on them. And the way the papers are made too, there's like adhesive, like in between their, what are they called? Not ligaments, or I can't remember what's called, but it's like a filler. So some papers soak up tea better than others. And then, yeah, it could be too, and this is the last one, that you didn't let your tea steep long enough. You might have just put it in the pan and maybe you didn't boil it maybe it didn't steep in there long enough. It just didn't give enough time for for your solution to get darker and for your papers to then be darker. So those could be the things there. So yeah, so that's tea dyeing. I'm gonna admit right now, I love tea dyeing. Once you start doing this, it's gonna be addictive. You're gonna look around your house and look for any kind of paper that you can tea dye. And you know what? Do it because it's just paper. If it's paper that's just gonna be thrown away, not thrown away, but recycled anyway, then go ahead and tea dye it. Just give it a chance. And it might be something really cool. And, if you want to just get your fingers in there and just play and just have a good time, like put random objects in there, just like, oh, I'll use the bottom of my spray bottle and just kind of put it in there. You're going to have a cool ring. Like, just grab stuff, just play, get that inner child in you out. And then that's going to show up in your papers too. And you're just going to have like just fun papers to play with, vintage papers to use. And you're just going to be wowed at the awesomeness that you're going to create doing tea dyeing. So yeah, so that's tea dyeing. I really hoped you liked this. If you like this video, make sure you hit that little like button, and that really helps out with feedback. And also leave a little note, just like say, hey, I like tea dyeing. I've done this method before, or no, I've never done it before, but I'm going to try it, or try it and tell me how it turned out. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, and if you're not a subscriber, feel free to subscribe because we're doing a tutorial every week. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a junk journal. So if you want to join in on the process, make sure you subscribe. So this way, yeah, you won't miss anything. But thanks again for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Have a nice day. Bye.